Why the ancient Egyptian elite feared their own shadows reveals how power corrupts the soul. And if you stay to the end, you'll discover the shocking reality of servitude in the innermost household. The scent of copper and fresh oil hangs heavy in the reception hall. And if you imagine for a moment the cold shock of polished granite against your knees, you feel the chilling awareness that your life, your very identity, has been reduced to a transaction. You are Kia, 26 years old, and the cosmetic paste burns where the coal dust has been deliberately worked into the delicate skin surrounding your eyes. These small, stinging wounds created hours ago are intended to make your gaze more lustrous for the man who now assesses you. But only 37 days ago, you were a chieftain's daughter, promised to a prince, fluent in the poetry of your people, and now you are property, awaiting appraisal. And this sudden brutal shift from sovereign dignity to merchandise is the first profound fracture of your old life. Discover the shadow systems that ran ancient Egypt's darkest secrets, and why wealth defined their most vulnerable citizens. And if you want to know how real power worked behind the scenes, you need to understand the overseers, like Lord Senmut, overseer of the royal granaries, who walks among the 12 kneeling figures, his soft linen robes whispering against oiled skin, a man whose wealth is measured not just in fields, but in the bodies he owns. As his gaze sweeps over you, you feel the familiar sickening comparison. He assesses flesh with the same detached calculation a cattle trader uses on livestock. His steward records observations on papyrus, sealing your fate with ink. And this ritual of valuation is a deliberate psychological crucible, designed to break the spirit before the body is even assigned its duties. The quiet tension in the hall is suffocating, a silent testament to absolute, unconstrained power. The truth about ancient Egypt's secret administrators is often hidden. But this is what happened when a nobleman claimed ownership. Lord Senmut pauses before you, his expression that of a man who has never encountered denial, and he pronounces, "This one, the features are good, the body is acceptable." He signals, and the thin fabric, providing your only covering, is roughly pulled away, leaving you exposed. Your strength judged fit for labor, your refinement deemed suitable for displaying. Your background, literate in your own tongue, familiar with administration, carries a curious weight as it limits certain low-tier uses but drastically increases your potential value in the most sensitive and most dangerous spaces within his estate. How did enslaved women gain power in the most dangerous place in ancient Egypt? The steward writes down the fateful pronouncement, "Innermost Household," and you understand immediately the implication of that phrase. These women do not merely serve, they exist in a precarious, high-stakes stratum protected by proximity to the Lord's power. They are also exposed to the full volatile intensity of his desires, serving as concubines and shadow administrators, producing children who will never inherit, but who will carry his bloodline. This space is a gilded cage where the collapse of dignity is a prerequisite for survival. The order is given. "Prepare her for my quarters this evening." The standard preparation. This dark ritual was the key to survival in ancient Egypt's elite circles. And if you're asking how they managed their terror, the standard preparation is a chilling euphemism you have learned to dread, as it involves a systematic violation of personal space and autonomy. Layers of bathing, oiling, and scenting designed not for hygiene, but to transform the body into a pleasing object. Aromatic, smooth, and aesthetically compliant for the coming violation. As you are guided away, an older woman, Merit, takes your arm. Her grip is firm, not cruel, and her accent carries the echoes of your own homeland. She is the first human connection you have found, and she is the harbinger of a terrible education. What history is hidden from the official Egyptian records, and how did the enslaved pass down their knowledge? Merit leads you through increasingly private, richly decorated corridors, a labyrinth that symbolizes the stratification of the household. In a small chamber prepared for the bathing ritual, she finally speaks, her voice low and carefully controlled. "I was where you are 22 years ago," she says, adding that what you are about to learn has been systematically excluded from the grand histories. The history taught in temples speaks of Pharaoh's eternal life and magnificent temples, But Merit speaks of the foundations the palaces maintained by bodies, the wealth sustained by enslaved women whose existence has been meticulously purged from the historical record. This is the shocking truth about servitude in ancient Egypt that the temples never taught, revealing how power controlled every aspect of life. This is the shadow history, the grim reality of how a magnificent civilization managed its most vulnerable human resources. Ancient Egyptian servitude was a cruel spectrum of unfreedom, ranging from debt bondsmen to the foreign war captives like yourself, stripped of all legal status and facing permanent hereditary bondage. Within this system, enslaved women were categorized simultaneously as laborers, producers of children, and objects of sexual access. They were hemet, domestic servant, segment, sexual property, and moret, child-bearer, often classified under all terms at once, expected to fulfill any function demanded by their owner. You won't believe the hierarchy of ancient Egyptian servitude, showing how proximity to the Lord dictated survival, which reveals the nobility's households were organized into hierarchies of degradation. At the bottom were the field laborers, and above them domestic servants with marginally better conditions. At the apex, though, it was a summit of terrifying vulnerability, were the women of the innermost household. Chosen for their intelligence and physical attributes, they enjoyed better clothing and food and proximity to power. But their privilege was inextricably linked to their primary function, to serve the Lord's most intimate needs, both physical and psychological. This constant high-pressure exposure was their primary danger. The critical choice that saved one woman's life in ancient Egypt's innermost household shows how she learned to navigate the impossible system. Merit begins the preparation, her hands expertly applying the scented oil to your skin. You have a choice, she states, her eyes sharp, reflecting the light of the lamp. Not the choice to refuse or leave, but how you respond. Whether you remain a victim of this system or learn to navigate it, to use it, to eventually make it serve purposes it was never designed to serve. This realization that pure endurance is insufficient is a critical turning point. Merit suggests that survival requires transformation from passive victim to active strategist, a move that demands the sacrifice of what cannot be preserved. This master strategy is how one enslaved woman achieved power in the elite circles of ancient Egypt, teaching us that Merit's face, marked by lines of long suppression and constant vigilance, also displays a compelling confidence, and she explains her own rise. I did more than survive. I rose. I am the senior woman of this innermost household. Her ascent was not achieved through resistance, but through necessity. Lord Senmut wants more than mere compliance. He needs consultation, perspective, and intelligent engagement that does not require the pretense of equality. I became necessary, she explains. Necessary people, unlike advisors, are protected because their absence creates immediate problems for the master. The brutal cost of survival in ancient Egypt's innermost household reveals what they sacrificed to live. The immediate reality of the night is non-negotiable, and Merit warns you. Resistance, tears, or open defiance will only mark you as someone who must be broken before being useful. Acceptance, strategic engagement, and the demonstration of value, however, mark you as an investment. You are asked to perform the role of the willing concubine, not out of desire, but as a mechanism of self-preservation. This counsel is monstrous. It demands collaboration with your own degradation, but it is also brutally, systemically realistic. The sacrifice of dignity is the currency of survival here. This critical bargain allowed an enslaved woman to become the architect of the shadows in ancient Egypt, showing how she traded guidance for power. Kia absorbs the cold calculation. You realize Merit is not offering kindness, but a transaction, guidance and protection in exchange for future loyalty. She views your intelligence and education as capital, a valuable asset she will cultivate to strengthen her own position. Your failure reflects only on you, while your success validates her judgment. Teach me, you reply. I will learn. This agreement, the first of many such compromises, defines your new existence. The survival of your identity hinges on the strategy of performance. What truly happens on the first night in an ancient Egyptian noble's chambers, and how did the victim turn trauma into strategy? The first night is precisely as Merit had warned. Lord Senmut exercises his rights over property, satisfying appetites without genuine cruelty or consideration. You perform the required duties. Afterward, alone in the small chamber adjacent to his quarters, you resist the urge to cry. Tears are a weakness, a luxury that might be reported by others vying for position. Instead, you analyze the encounter, the Lord's preferences, his physical patterns, the moments of vulnerability you might exploit for strategic advantage. Every assault is processed, not as trauma, but as critical data. The secret to survival in ancient Egypt's elite households was performing the role of the willing concubine, revealing how one woman mastered the ultimate deception. Over the following weeks, you refine the performance. Senmut prefers intelligence, but not independence, conversation, but not argument. He craves the illusion of voluntary submission, a performance of willing participation that validates his self-image as a generous master. You learn to anticipate his moods, offering flattery that appeals to his immense vanity, without seeming entirely servile. Inside, a core of identity remains untouchable by the performance, a fortress you protect by projecting the required exterior. How did a captive become one of the most powerful women in ancient Egypt in just 7 years? And what was the secret currency of their power? Merit confirms your rapid ascent. He has asked for you specifically 3 times this week. This exclusivity is a fragile advantage, but it grants you access and proximity. Information is power, even for slaves, she reminds you. You begin a quiet accumulation, listening intently when Senmut discusses business with visitors, when his steward reads correspondence. The assumption is that a Nubian captive cannot understand administrative Egyptian, but you can. Your chieftain's education, rapidly expanded in captivity, gives you a hidden mental archive of vulnerability. The strategic sacrifice that sealed a captive's future in ancient Egypt reveals why she suppressed her maternal love. The second year brings the expected pregnancy and the birth of a son. He is immediately taken away, given to wet nurses, property of the Lord, not of you. Merit warns that maternal attachment will be used as a lever of control if permitted. You suppress the powerful, immediate instinct of motherhood, transforming that love into strategic intent. You will protect your son not through open devotion, but through the patient, inexorable accumulation of power that will eventually influence his fate. The unexpected illness that triggered a massive power shift in ancient Egypt's innermost household shows how one woman capitalized on crisis. By the 3rd year, Merit is incapacitated by a persistent fever. While rivals scramble, you demonstrate quiet, indispensable competence, seamlessly absorbing her duties. When Merit recovers, she recognizes the inevitable and accelerates your training. Your rise is so swift and smooth that by year 7, upon Merit's death, you step into the role of senior woman of the innermost household. At 33, only 7 years after your capture, you are one of the most powerful women in the estate. The dangerous game of influence in ancient Egypt's elite circles reveals how one enslaved administrator leveraged necessity. Your power remains conditional, tethered to Senmut's continued favor. You expand your usefulness beyond managing the household to advising on administration, leveraging your stored knowledge to provide insights his formal advisors cannot. You build a network of mutual dependence among the steward and overseers, making your removal an administrative liability. This is the foundation of your quiet transformation. You cannot destroy the system, but you can modify its worst excesses from within. This is how the architect of shadows subtly changed ancient Egyptian servitude, revealing the invisible reforms that saved countless lives. The changes are subtle, invisible to the outside world. You quietly discontinue the worst aspects of the standard preparation, the painful cuts, the injurious oils, ensuring that women entering the household now receive cosmetic treatment rather than mutilation under the guise of enhancement. You establish a system for rotating women through the Lord's attention, deflecting destructive focus from single individuals and creating vital recovery time for those endangered by his intensity. The unbelievable protection one enslaved woman created for her children in ancient Egypt shows how she bent the system designed for consumption. You protect the children born to enslaved women, including your own son, who now holds a minor administrative post. You ensure that other women's children receive similar consideration, replacing the pattern of careless disposal with a fragile form of humane protection. From the exterior, nothing has changed. Lord Senmut still maintains absolute control. But from the interior, you have fundamentally altered the lived experience of dozens of enslaved women, creating pathways to relative safety that did not previously exist. The moral complexity of survival in ancient Egypt's shadow administration reveals the heavy cost of protecting others. This is the core of your compromise. You cannot save anyone without remaining deeply complicit in the system that endangers them. You are simultaneously victim and collaborator, protector and performer. You maintain the structures of oppression while using the authority granted by those structures to alleviate suffering. Your power is built on necessity, and necessity demands this moral complexity. What came next changed everything. Year 15 brings a profound crisis as Senmut's legitimate eldest son, Kamweset, asserts his authority. Unlike his calculating father, Kamweset is impulsive, cruel, and profoundly resents your influence, seeing you as a symbol of his father's forbidden indulgence. When my father dies, he threatens, your position ends. I will transfer you to the field labor pool. Your careful decades of ascent threaten to dissolve in a moment of arbitrary spite. The ultimate betrayal that threatened the entire system in ancient Egypt reveals the desperate confession that forced immediate action. Your preparation for this inevitable moment had focused on escape and leverage, but Kamweset accelerates the timeline. He explicitly suggests parricide to you, warning that old men die suddenly, especially those whose food passes through many hands. He is signaling that your protector may soon be removed, and that you will be the first to suffer the purge. This terrifying disclosure demands immediate, absolute action. The astonishing moment one enslaved woman dictated the succession of a great Egyptian household reveals the power of mutual necessity. That evening you confront the aging Lord Senmut in private. Your son threatens your life, you state directly. He wants you dead so he can destroy me. He is not patient enough to wait. Senmut, now 70, and acutely aware of his mortality, is surprised by your directness. He asks the astonishing question, "What would you have me do?" This is the moment of greatest influence. You, the enslaved chieftain's daughter, are being invited to dictate the succession of one of Egypt's great households. How did a slave become the ultimate political strategist in ancient Egypt? And what impossible logic saved the master's life? You advise him to remove Kamweset from the succession, sending him to a distant provincial post and to designate a more temperate son as heir. The logic remains the same. My survival is bound to your survival. My advice serves your interests because your interests are my interests. Senmut accepts the logic of mutual necessity. Kamweset is exiled, and the crisis is averted. But you have made an implacable enemy who will wait decades for vengeance. The unbelievable final status of an enslaved administrator in ancient Egypt reveals how her practical authority surpassed free nobles. Lord Senmut dies peacefully 3 years later. The transition to the designated heir, Amenhotep, is smooth, and your position evolves further. You are no longer the senior woman, but an unparalleled administrator and advisor, whose counsel is sought on matters of state and estate management. You are technically still a slave, yet your practical authority exceeds that of many free Egyptians. The true measure of victory for the architect of shadows in ancient Egypt was the legacy she built for her descendants. Your true victory is realized in the security of your children. Though they are not free, that status is denied to children born of enslaved mothers. They are protected. Your son is secure in administration. Your daughters are positioned favorably through marriages and temple service. This is your enduring legacy, the creation of a protected bloodline. descendants who carry something of your influence forward into generations you will never see. You have bent a system designed for consumption toward the purpose of preservation. The final, shocking challenge that nearly destroyed her legacy reveals how the loyalty of the enslaved became her ultimate defense. At 61, 35 years into your captivity, Kamwiset returns upon Amenhotep's sudden death, seizing control of the household amid chaos. His first act is vengeance, your arrest. You are stripped of your position and returned to the communal slave quarters. Subjected to the humiliation you endured on day one, your power structure has collapsed. However, you are no longer the frightened girl. You still possess hidden resources, and, critically, the profound, quiet loyalty of the other slaves. How the enslaved sabotaged the cruelest heir in ancient Egypt shows the collective power of hidden resistance. The women you protected, the conditions you improved, the collective memory of your influence now protects you. The slaves resist Kamwiset's brutal administration with silent sabotage and slow work. Simultaneously, the channels you prepared decades earlier are activated. A priest named Useret, who benefited from your intelligence, learns of the irregularities in Kamwiset's claim and initiates an investigation. The ultimate vindication of the Architect of Shadows reveals how her strategic foresight defeated her greatest enemy. The investigation suspends Kamwiset's authority and scrutinizes his cruelty. After months, his claim is exposed as fraudulent. Kamwiset is arrested, tried for usurpation, and met a tragic end, his name violently erased from all records. You are restored to power, serving the Regency Council as a formal administrator. You die at 68, a slave whose practical authority surpassed many free nobles, having engineered the final defeat of your greatest threat. Your legacy endures, incremental, compromised change that made the lived experience of countless women measurably better. This video is created for educational and historical purposes. It examines themes of power, corruption, and human conflict without depicting explicit or graphic events. The cost of the pyramids and the grand tombs was measured in the suffering of those whose names were never recorded. Kia's story, though an exception, reveals the profound systemic cruelty built into the foundations of that magnificence. If this unsettled you, you're not alone. Walk further into history's shadows with us.